What happens when following your faith doesn't lead to safety, but straight to your own death? In April 1943, Dietrich Bonhoeffer lived that reality. He sat in a freezing, foul-smelling cell, heavily shackled, locked inside the top floor of Tegel prison. The guards toss dry bread through a crack. The warden screams in his face, calling him a filthy traitor. Other prisoners sob uncontrollably around him. He is a prominent, peaceful Christian pastor. Yet the Gestapo just dragged him away for high treason. Because Bonhoeffer isn't just a theologian, he is a double agent, a spy working inside Hitler's own military intelligence. He is actively helping plot the assassination of Adolf Hitler. He didn't have to be here. He had already narrowly escaped Nazi Germany once before. He was completely safe in New York City with a prestigious job, living on American soil where the war couldn't touch him. So what compelled him to abandon that safety and board a ship heading straight back into the heart of Nazi Germany? New York City was a perfectly safe exile. An entire ocean separated him from the rising terror of Nazi Germany. By the summer of 1939, the regime was rapidly tightening its grip. For a vocal anti-Hitler pastor like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, staying in Berlin was a death sentence. He had already been labeled an enemy of the state. The Gestapo permanently shut down his underground seminary. He was legally banned from speaking publicly or publishing his writing. Worse, the 33-year-old was facing the military draft. He would soon be forced to swear an oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler. So American colleagues arranged an escape route specifically for him. They secured him a prestigious academic fellowship, and Bonhoeffer accepted the offer and crossed the Atlantic. His escape to the United States had guaranteed him a stable income, a comfortable life, and total protection. Dietrich Bonhoeffer had successfully escaped Nazi Germany, but almost immediately a crushing weight of guilt settled over him. Sitting in the safety of Manhattan, he realized this trip was a terrible mistake. He wrote an agonizing letter to his American host explaining that a return was necessary. The reasoning was incredibly simple, yet profoundly challenging. If he did not suffer alongside the German people now, then he would have no moral right to help rebuild the country later. Choosing safety felt like a betrayal. It was a total rejection of his calling to follow Jesus into the suffering of the world. So he made a decision that completely baffled his friends. After only 26 days in the United States, Bonhoeffer packed his bags. He booked a ticket on one of the very last ships returning to Europe and watched the free world fade away on the horizon. As the ship crossed the Atlantic, his diary entries revealed a heavy sense of spiritual dread. The pastor knew exactly what kind of nightmare awaited him. But a pastor returning to a war zone is one thing. Actually fighting back against a massive military dictatorship is another challenge entirely. When Bonhoeffer stepped off that ship in Germany, everything had changed. Peaceful protest was completely dead. The church institution he helped build was deeply compromised. Many pastors had been drafted or silenced by pure fear. He realized quickly that simply preaching against Hitler was no longer enough. He needed a new way to fight. The solution came through his brother-in-law, Hans von Donany. Hans was a brilliant legal mind, but more importantly, he was a high-ranking officer in the Abwehr. The Abwehr was the official military intelligence agency for the Nazi armed forces. And this is where history gets incredibly ironic. To the average citizen, working for military intelligence meant absolute, unquestioning loyalty to Hitler. But in reality, the Abwehr was the safest place in Germany to hide a resistance. Think about how a spy agency operates. It inherently requires total secrecy, false identities, and classified government funds. It operates entirely in the shadows. Hans and his boss, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, used this exact cover to plot against the state. In the fall of 1940, Hans officially recruited Bonhoeffer into the Abwehr. On paper, the peaceful pastor was now a civilian intelligence agent working for the Nazi war machine. This official title legally exempted him from fighting on the front lines. It gave him access to government vehicles and highly restricted travel passes. He was literally using the official protection of the Nazi military to plot its total destruction. But having the perfect cover is only half the battle. Now the pastor had to use his new identity to smuggle Jewish refugees to safety and pass military secrets to the Allies. Now, operating in the shadows, Bonhoeffer's unique background became his greatest weapon. As a prominent, well-connected church leader, he had the perfect excuse to travel. The Abwehr officially sent him to neutral countries like Switzerland and Sweden. On paper, his mission was simple: gather foreign intelligence using his church contacts. But his real agenda was to help bring down the Nazi regime. The pastor held secret meetings with high-ranking British contacts. During these trips, highly classified secrets about the German resistance exchanged hands. The ultimate goal was to secure foreign support for a new German government. But Bonhoeffer wasn't just smuggling information, he was smuggling lives. In 1942, the conspirators executed a daring rescue mission called Operation 7. Ultimately, the group identified 14 Jewish individuals they planned to rescue. These people were about to be sent to concentration camps. To save them, the Abwehr secretly drafted these refugees. They created elaborate forged paperwork, claiming the refugees were Nazi spies. Against all odds, they got this paperwork approved. It was even stamped by the SS, Hitler's elite security force. The group used classified military funds to finance the escape, and all 14 people were smuggled safely into Switzerland. A peaceful pastor was now deeply embedded in a dangerous military conspiracy. Using Nazi money to trick the Gestapo was a big shift from his previous career. Rescuing refugees made perfect sense for his faith, but helping plot an assassination caused a spiritual crisis. How could a Christian leader justify lying, deceiving, and plotting murder? Bonhoeffer came to a radical realization. Trying to keep his own hands perfectly clean felt selfish. Standing quietly by while innocent people were slaughtered was simply not an option. When a state becomes wholly evil, normal ethical rules are suspended. He accepted that plotting an assassination would stain his own soul, but the pastor willingly took on that heavy burden. Placing his faith entirely in the mercy of God, he made a choice. Failing to act would be an even greater evil. Sacrificing his own clean conscience was the only way to save millions. And his espionage was working flawlessly until a financial trail caught the attention of the wrong people. That financial trail led the Gestapo directly to his family's home. On April 5, 1943, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was arrested. He was handcuffed, placed in a black Mercedes, and taken to Tegel prison. At first, the Gestapo didn't know anything about the assassination plot. They only suspected him of dodging the military draft and misusing government funds. Because of this, his imprisonment was full of contradictions. He spent his days in a dark, freezing cell, listening to other prisoners sob. But because his family was highly connected, the prison staff occasionally treated him like royalty. At one point, his uncle, who was a German general, came to visit him. The two men sat inside the miserable prison and drank champagne together for 5 hours. But this strange, suspended reality did not last. On July 20, 1944, the resistance finally made their move. A co-conspirator planted a briefcase bomb inside Hitler's military headquarters. The bomb exploded, but it failed to kill the dictator. Hitler survived, and his regime demanded absolute bloody revenge. The Gestapo tore the country apart looking for the traitors. During the manhunt, they discovered hidden Abwehr files that explicitly linked Bonhoeffer to the assassination plot. His fate was instantly sealed. Knowing he would be executed, a sympathetic prison guard actually offered Bonhoeffer an escape plan. The guard had smuggled in a mechanic's disguise and false identity papers, but Bonhoeffer refused to use them. He had just learned that the Gestapo had arrested his brother and his brother-in-law. The pastor knew that if he vanished, the Nazis would torture and kill his family in retaliation. So, he chose to stay in his cell and face the gallows. Even facing certain death, his faith did not waver. Instead, his time in prison completely transformed his theology. He secretly wrote letters from his cell that were smuggled out by friendly guards. In these letters, he rejected the idea of a comfortable, safe religion. He argued that true Christianity was not about religious rituals or hiding inside church buildings. True faith meant stepping directly into the suffering of the world to serve others. On April 8, 1945, Bonhoeffer was transferred to the Flossenburg concentration camp. He was brought before a hasty military court and sentenced to death. Before being led away, he pulled aside a fellow prisoner. He gave the man a final message for his friends. "This is the end," Bonhoeffer said, "but for me, the beginning of life." The very next morning, on April 9th, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was hanged. He was executed just 2 weeks before Allied forces liberated the camp. Ultimately, his story is a profound reflection of the gospel itself. Jesus Christ abandoned the absolute safety of heaven to enter a broken world. He took on the suffering of humanity to offer salvation. Dietrich Bonhoeffer followed that exact example. He willingly left the safety of America to suffer alongside his people. He gave up his own life to fight a terrible evil. And his sacrifice forces us to look in the mirror and ask a difficult question. If true faith requires stepping into the fire, what are you willing to risk?